Imagine this. A storm rages over Charleston, thunder tearing the night sky apart. In the middle of the flood, a little girl sits stranded in a broken wheelchair. Her arms too weak to push forward, her voice lost beneath the rain. People pass. No one stops. No one even sees her until one man does. Graham Ellis, a millionaire known for his cold ambition, pulls his car to the curb. He doesn't know it yet, but the moment he steps into the storm, his life will never be the same. Because sometimes the smallest hands hold the power to break down the tallest walls, and sometimes love finds us where we least expect it, in the middle of the darkness. Stay with us, because what happens next will touch your soul. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories, where every tale brings hope back to life. The storm came without warning, rolling in from the Atlantic with a fury that seemed almost personal. Rain battered the rooftops of Charleston, turning its cobblestone streets into rivers, and thunder split the air with a force that shook the old foundations of the city. In the middle of this chaos, a small figure sat on the edge of the sidewalk, motionless except for the trembling of her frail arms. A little girl in a battered wheelchair, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her sweatshirt soaked through and clinging to her skin. She tried to move the wheels, but they were bent, rusted, and too heavy for her fragile hands. The gutter water surged around her like a shallow flood, pushing her further toward the street. She whispered to herself that someone would come, but no one did. Cars sped by, their headlights glancing over her like she was nothing more than a shadow. Passers-by hurried beneath umbrellas, their eyes fixed forward, refusing to notice. She was invisible, and yet in that moment of complete abandonment, a sleek black Mercedes screeched to a halt. The driver's chest seized, his breath caught. Graham Ellis, a man who had built an empire of glass towers and billion-dollar deals, was not accustomed to surprises. But tonight, in the glare of his headlights, he saw something that undid him. He threw the car into park and stepped out into the rain, his Italian leather shoes instantly ruined. But he didn't care. The storm ripped at his suit, but his focus was only on the girl. Her lips were bluish, her arms trembling as she clutched a thin plastic bag against her lap like it might shield her from the world. "Hey," he called, his voice rougher than he intended. She turned slowly, eyes wide, red from tears and cold. For a moment, she looked as though she couldn't believe anyone had actually spoken to her. When she tried to answer, her voice came out as a whisper carried off by the storm. Somebody said someone would come, but nobody came. Those words pierced through the armor Graham had built around himself over years of power and control.
Now.
He rushed forward, slipping once on the slick stones, and steadied himself before kneeling beside her. Up close, he saw how young she really was, 6, maybe 7 at most. Her legs hung limp beneath drenched leggings, and her body was so light it felt like air when he lifted her into his arms. She startled as if unused to being held, but then collapsed against his shoulder, too weak to resist. "No one's dying tonight," Graham muttered, though the words were more of a promise to himself than to her. Her eyelids fluttered once, then closed. Panic shot through him. "Stay with me," he urged. The thunder answered, louder than before, as if mocking his desperation. He carried her back to the car, water splashing to his knees, and laid her gently across the back seat. His wool coat went around her shoulders, the heat turned to full blast, and his phone was in his hand dialing 911. But the dispatcher's words chilled him. Roads blocked, emergency routes flooded, no help until morning unless the child was stable. Stable. She was barely breathing. Graham clenched the steering wheel and drove anyway, cutting through the streets with a ferocity that surprised even him. He had stared down competitors in boardrooms without a flicker of emotion, but tonight his chest ached with a fear he couldn't control. At last he turned not toward the hospital, but toward his home. He knew she needed warmth first, safety, a place to cling to life. The penthouse doors opened with a soft chime, and for the first time, the vast space inside felt too large, too hollow. He carried her across polished hardwood floors that gleamed like ice beneath dripping footsteps. He laid her gently on the sectional couch,
How are you
the
feeling,
pristine
Laya?
white cushions
A little
darkening
better,
under
thank
the
you.
water seeping from her clothes. She looked impossibly small against the vastness of his world. He fetched blankets, the softest he owned, and wrapped them around her. He knelt, awkward and unsure, patting her damp forehead with a towel. She stirred faintly, her eyes half opening in confusion. "This isn't the hospital," she murmured. "No," he said softly. "It's my home. I'm Graham." She gave the smallest nod, then winced as if even the act of existing was exhausting.
Goodness.
He told her not to push, to rest.
Goodness.
She tried to sit up anyway, her frail arms trembling before sinking back down. Her voice cracked when she whispered. She said someone nice would come. I waited 2 days, but nobody came. Graham froze. The words echoed in his chest, twisting like a knife. "Who said that?" he asked. But she only closed her eyes, too tired to answer. He turned away quickly, hiding the surge of rage and sorrow threatening to consume him.
Just to
His
remember
hands
that there
busied
is always
themselves with
hope.
boiling water, steeping tea, anything to avoid shattering in front of her. When he returned, she flinched at his touch, shrinking back as though expecting cruelty. He raised both palms, voice low. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." For the first time in years, Graham Ellis did not feel in control.
You're
He
not
felt
it.
human.
You're
And as
Lyle
he
Rose
sat
Turner.
there watching the rise and fall of her fragile chest, he realized the storm outside had only been a beginning. The real storm was inside him now, tearing down walls he thought would never break. That night when she whispered in her sleep, "Please don't lock me in the shed again," he nearly broke. He found her later curled on the floor instead of the bed, a pillow under her head like she had learned never to claim comfort that wasn't offered. He lifted her again, gentler this time, and tucked her beneath the blankets. Her small hand brushed his for a fleeting second before falling still. That touch, unintentional as it was, hit him harder than any victory or betrayal in business ever
Do I
had.
have to pay you back for this
He stood in the
kindness?
doorway long after, watching her breathe. A knot in his throat he didn't know how to untangle.
You don't owe me anything.
And somewhere deep inside, Graham understood. Tonight wasn't just about saving a child from a storm. It was about saving himself, too. Because in her brokenness, he had seen a reflection of his own. And neither of them would ever be the same again. The first light of morning spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the penthouse in muted
Graham
gold.
smiles faintly,
Graham
surprised
Ellis had
she
not
noticed
slept.
his small details.
He sat at the kitchen island with a mug of untouched coffee, staring at the faint rise and fall of the little girl's chest as she
That's a good
slept
one.
under a blanket on the couch.
Sometimes I have a bad
Every
day.
tick of the clock reminded
My
him
mom
that
says
this was
that it's
no
important
dream,
to remember that
no fleeting
everybody
illusion
has them.
brought by exhaustion. She was real. The night had brought her to him, fragile and broken, and somehow it felt as though his life before her had been the illusion instead. When she finally stirred, it was with the clumsy effort of someone not used to comfort.
So he would never
She
know the
flinched at the
truth,
sound of her
and they
own
could live
voice when
happily
she
ever
murmured,
after.
"This isn't the hospital." Her eyes darted around the penthouse, wide with unease, as though she were trapped in some otherworldly place she did not belong. Graham kept his tone gentle. "No, this is my home.
Can I pretend
You are
you are
safe
my
here."
dad for one
She
night?
nodded faintly, but distrust lingered in her expression like a shadow. He noticed the way she avoided the bed he had prepared for her, curling up instead on the couch, or later, beside it on the floor with only a pillow beneath her head. It was as if she had been trained not to take up space, not to believe she deserved comfort. Every time he moved toward her, she stiffened, waiting for cruelty that never came, and every time his heart cracked a little more. By dawn, he had driven to an all-night pharmacy and returned with a proper wheelchair, still too large for her small frame, but infinitely better than the broken contraption that had nearly drowned her. When she wheeled herself slowly into the hallway, her hair brushed, her clothes borrowed from his gym drawer, she looked like a ghost half returned to life. He offered her tea, and she surprised him with a tiny spark of wit. "Is it the sleepy kind
One
or
of his
the real
favorite
kind?"
things to do was
He
to sit
chuckled
by the
despite
window
himself.
and watch the clouds drift
"Definitely
by.
the real kind." She accepted it carefully, holding the cup with both hands as though it might vanish if she wasn't careful. Bit by bit, she told him fragments of her past. A woman she called not really my mom had once cared for her, or pretended to. She admitted she was left in the shed for days, waiting for someone who never came. When she whispered, she said I was too much trouble. Graham had to turn away,
Guardianship
afraid
becomes
his anger
necessary
would
when an
frighten
individual is
her. His
unable to
hands
make
gripped the
decisions for
countertop
themselves
until his
due to
knuckles
various
went
reasons
white,
like
but his
age
voice
or
when he
mental
returned to her
incapacity.
was steady. "You are not too much
I
trouble,
promise that
not
I will
ever."
commit to you for real, Julia.
At Charleston General, a nurse confirmed what he already suspected.
It is
The
not
girl,
enough.
whose name was Leah Rose Turner, had
It is
spina
not
bifida.
enough.
It was not degenerative, but it required care, therapy, proper equipment,
Will
all
you
of which
keep
she had been
pretending to be
denied.
my dad?
Malnutrition had left her
Really?
underweight by 20 pounds. She had not just been neglected,
It's not
she had
pretending
been
anymore.
discarded. Graham listened with clenched jaw, his chest tightening with every word. He had battled ruthless executives across boardroom tables, but nothing had ever enraged him the way this did. When they left the hospital with a paper bag of medications and ointments, Leia's voice was small but steady. "Can we go back to the place she left me?" Against every instinct, he agreed. They drove to the crumbling rental house, weeds clawing at its broken porch.
Look how great
the
it
shed in the
is.
backyard
Yeah,
leaning like a wound that would never close.
That's a nice place.
Inside, the
Yeah.
stench of
can
mold
paint
and
it
rot
any
clawed
color
at their
you want.
throats. A mattress stained with years of neglect sat in one corner, scraps of food containers scattered on the floor.
Will
And on
you
the
be
wall,
in the picture
taped with
too?
brittle strips of yellowed paper, was a child's drawing, a cabin on a hill, a swing, a man and a girl holding hands. Leia's voice was flat. "I used to draw that
beautiful.
when it got scary. I wanted to believe something else could exist."
The stars are really
Graham
bright
could
tonight.
not speak. His throat closed around the words that should have come. Instead, he crossed the room, peeled the fragile paper from the wall, folded it, and slipped it into
That
his
is
coat
really
pocket
lovely.
like a vow.
Should I
He
help?
picked up a battered teddy bear from the dust, its ear chewed, one eye missing, and handed it to her. "You are not in it," he told her quietly when she admitted the woman had called her that. "You are Leah Rose Turner, and no one gets to take that from you." Her small hand clutched the bear with a fierceness that made his own eyes sting. That night he transformed the guest room. The sterile gray bedding was replaced with sunshine yellow sheets, a lavender rug, and a shelf lined with books he had bought in a rush, stories of brave girls, pirates, and explorers. When she wheeled into
Please
the
stay
room,
with
she
me.
asked hesitantly, "Do I have to pay you back?" The question shattered him. He knelt so she could see the truth in his eyes. "No, you don't owe me anything." She ran her fingers across the new comforter, whispering, "It's soft, like a dream." For the first time, he allowed himself
How are
to
her vitals
smile.
holding up?
A little shaky,
Later, she
but
showed him a
we're
new
stabilizing
drawing.
her.
This one was of the living room couch, a stick figure curled under a blanket. She had drawn him too, with glasses and gray at his temples. "Is this me?"
Are you okay?
he asked softly. She shrugged.
Are you
"I
okay?
didn't know if you'd be mad. Some people don't like being in pictures." He chuckled, a sound that felt foreign in his own throat. "Well, I think you made me look tall," she replied, matter of fact. "You are tall, like tree tall." He laughed, and for a fleeting moment, the heavy silence between them softened. That night he sat beside her on the couch, a copy of
You
Matilda
stayed.
open in his hands. His voice, usually clipped and commanding in boardrooms, shifted into something softer, slower,
I
as he
promise
read
you I will
aloud.
never leave.
She nestled under the blanket, her eyelids drooping, until her small head fell gently against his side. One hand clutched the fabric of his shirt, and he froze, not wanting to disturb the fragile trust she had just offered him.
Tamara, what
His
happened
phone
on the night of the
buzzed with an
14th?
investor call reminder, but he silenced it without
Your
a
Honor,
thought.
these documents include
Nothing in
various
his
diagrams,
world mattered
photos,
more
and
than the
medical
child
reports.
leaning against him. When he carried her to bed, she stirred, murmuring, "Is it okay if I pretend you're my dad, just tonight?" His breath caught. He knelt, brushing her damp curls
Some
back
days
from
are
her
hard
forehead.
and some days are filled
"Yes,
with wonder.
sweetheart, you can pretend anything
But I
you want."
choose to stay.
She
I
smiled
choose to
faintly
stay
before
because I
drifting
have
back
to.
into sleep. On her nightstand beside the bear, she placed a drawing of the cabin again. Only this time the sky was bright blue, and the little girl was holding the
Leia,
hand of the tall
do you
man
wanna say
beside
anything?
her, and she was smiling. Graham stood there, staring at the picture long after she had fallen asleep.
I just want you to be
Something
my
inside
dad
him
for
shifted,
real.
breaking free from years of silence and loneliness. He had not just rescued a child from a storm. He was learning, painfully, beautifully, that she was rescuing him too. The days that followed unfolded with a rhythm neither of them had ever known. For Graham Ellis, silence had always been the soundtrack of his penthouse.
It is gonna be
The
all
hum
right.
of machines, the echo of empty rooms, the sterile calm of wealth. But now, that silence was broken by the faint sound of a wheelchair gliding across the floor, the clink of a spoon
out.
stirring cocoa, and the quiet
this
hum of a
yellow
little
door right
girl
here?
who was beginning to believe she
I
could
love it. It's
exist without
perfect.
vanishing. The penthouse breathed now. It lived. Leia filled his world with fragments of childhood he had never imagined would mean so much.
I will build it
She
for
asked
you.
questions endlessly, questions no corporate strategist had ever dared. Do you think the moon is lonely? Why do elevators beep? Would you still care if I could not talk anymore? And each time he answered honestly, because she was not testing him. She was teaching him what it meant to be present. There were moments of laughter, like the time she declared peanut butter toast tasted better without crusts, and he found himself beautifully cutting them away
Hi,
each
everyone.
morning.
I brought some lemonade.
There were moments of awe,
Wonderful.
like
Thank
when
you,
she
Julia.
gasped at the
Perfect,
bookshelf he
just
had
what we
filled for her
needed.
and whispered. She didn't let the bad people win after discovering Matilda.
You
And there
are
were
a little
moments of
slow,
quiet
aren't you?
heartbreak when he caught her counting exits in every room or tensing at sudden noises. But each day, the shadows lifted a little more. When Julia Reyes, the social worker, first visited, Leia gripped her wheelchair tightly, eyes wary. Graham placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "I am not going anywhere," he whispered. Julia studied him carefully before nodding. "Then we need to talk about the future." The words weighed heavier
We'll
than
try to
any
do our best
contract
not
he
to
had
spill
ever
the juice this
signed.
time.
He was not a foster parent. He had no legal claim. But when Julia asked if he was willing to commit, his answer was simple. Yes. She is mine now, not by blood, but by choice.
Here.
Julia's sharp
Thank you.
expression
Thank you.
softened. Then let us begin. Paperwork followed, inspections, questions designed to test resolve. Why
a
her?
beautiful
Why
day
now?
to be
Graham
together.
did not hesitate because
It
she
really
needed
is
someone,
perfect.
and I did not know how much I needed someone too. Julia wrote notes, but Graham saw the understanding in her eyes. One evening, after another round of forms and checklists, Leia looked up from her coloring book. "Are you going to keep pretending with me? Pretending you are my dad?" His chest tightened. He knelt beside her bed. "It is not pretending anymore, Leia. It never ended." She blinked at him, uncertain, then smiled faintly. That smile lit a corner of his soul he thought long gone. Weeks later, laughter returned to his home in ways he could not ignore. He found her drawing cabins again, but this time the doors were painted sunshine yellow, sparkling with possibility. She drew herself in a wheelchair with glittering lines around it as though she had turned it into magic, and always by her side a tall figure with gray at his temples. "When we live here," she asked one morning, "can I paint the door yellow?" Graham felt his throat close as he whispered,
Yes,
"Yes,
that's a great idea.
any color you want." She hesitated, then shyly added, "Can you be in the picture too?" He pulled her into his arms. "I already am." But peace is fragile. One night, as they sat watching an old animated film, Leia's laughter turned into coughing. At first light, her forehead burned with fever, her small body trembling violently. Panic tore through Graham. He scooped her into his
I'm
arms
here.
and ran,
Oh,
whispering her
good.
name over and over as though sheer will could anchor her. At the hospital, Nurse
Look
Mallory
how
worked
much we have
swiftly,
grown.
IVs and tests
We really have,
surrounding
haven't we?
Leia's fragile frame. Graham paced the corridor, his chest caged with fear, until Julia arrived to steady him. "She is in the right place," she said firmly. He wanted to believe her. Hours later, Mallory returned with tired eyes but a soft smile. "You got her here in time. She will be okay."
Oh my God,
Relief
it's so
buckled his
heavy.
knees. When he entered the room, Leia whispered hoarsely,
pour a little
"You
bit more."
stayed." He clasped her hand. "Of course I did. I am not most people." For the first time, she seemed to believe him. But the past refused to stay buried. Julia returned one morning with news. Tamara Voss had been found. Charges of neglect, fraud, abandonment. A hearing
I
would
feel
decide
safe
not
now.
only Tamara's fate, but Leia. Graham's decision was already made. "I will fight, whatever it takes." His words carried no hesitation, only truth. The courthouse smelled of paper and judgment. Graham wore a charcoal suit, but there was no armor in it, only resolve. He carried drawings, photographs, and medical
It was an
reports,
old
fragments of a
house,
child's life
full of
pieced together
creaks
to
and
prove what his heart
shadows.
already knew. Across the room sat Tamara, gaunt, unrepentant. But it was not her gaze that mattered. It was Leia's, seated in the front row beside Nurse Mallory, her teddy bear clutched tightly. She looked at him and he nodded once. He would not fail her. When the judge asked him to speak, Graham rose. "I did not find a runaway that night. I found a child abandoned in a storm. She needed shelter, so I gave it. She needed food, so I cooked. But most of all, she needed someone who would stay. And I did. I am not here because it is convenient. I am here because she is mine, not by blood, but by every measure that matters." His voice cracked, but he did not look away. Then the judge turned to Leia. The room fell silent. She looked down at her bear, then up at the bench, her voice trembling but clear. She called me. She said I cost too much, but Mr. Graham calls me Leia. He reads me stories. He stayed when I got sick.
I brought you some lemonade.
I do not want to pretend anymore.
Thank you.
I want him to be my dad for real. The stillness that followed was sacred. The judge folded her hands, eyes steady.
Good job,
Guardianship
Leia.
granted permanently.
Look at that.
No applause, only the collective
ready?
breath of a room that had been holding
Up
too
you
much
go.
sorrow for too long. Leia reached for Graham's hand. And just like that, the storm that had begun on a flooded street ended with a new beginning. Months later, sunlight poured through the windows of a cottage by the sea, its door painted bright yellow. Leia wheeled herself onto the porch, laughter spilling into the air, her cheeks full, her eyes alive. Graham stood beside her, coffee in hand, watching her with awe. The world of skyscrapers and contracts was gone, replaced by gardens, schoolwork, and the simple miracle of belonging.
That was wonderful, wasn't it?
One evening, she handed him another drawing.
Truly enjoyable.
This
thank
time
you.
the house was filled,
couldn't agree more.
not just with her and Graham, but with Julia, with friends, with the nurse who had saved her. Above their heads in uneven letters, one word glowed, Dad. Graham blinked back tears. Thank you, he whispered. Leia leaned against him, small but unshakable. You did
Oh
not
my
just
gosh.
save me, she said softly. You gave me a world where I belong. And in that quiet, Graham Ellis, once a man of stone and solitude, knew that for the first time in his life, he was
It was
truly
always a
home.
home because of him.
Sometimes life changes not with a grand decision, but with a single moment
Say
of courage.
cheese.
For
Everyone
Graham
ready?
Ellis,
Cheese.
it was the night he stepped out of his car and into a storm, lifting a fragile girl from the flood. For Leia, it was the moment she looked into his eyes and realized someone had finally come, someone who would not walk away. That meeting in the rain was not an accident. It was the beginning of a promise neither
The
of
little
them
bear,
knew how
whose name was
desperately they
Barnaby,
needed.
Yawned
In the
a
months that
big,
followed,
sleepy
a
yawn.
man who had once measured his worth in contracts and skyscrapers discovered a different kind of wealth. He learned that the sound of a child's laughter could be stronger than the applause of shareholders.
She
That a
is
simple
safe.
drawing of a yellow door could
Forever.
hold more value than any blueprint for a tower. That love does not ask for convenience, it demands presence. And for Leia, who had been discarded and silenced, life blossomed again. She found warmth in places once filled with shadows, trust in a voice that never
Look what I
wavered, and joy in the
found!
smallest rituals.
What is it?
Bedtime stories, morning cocoa, a hand that did not let go. The girl who once whispered, "Please don't let me die
morning,
here,"
everyone.
now whispered something
Good morning.
else.
Good morning.
You are my dad. Their story reminds us that family is not always about blood, but about the choice to stay, the courage to love, and the willingness to be transformed. It is about broken people finding each other
So
and discovering
funny.
that together they can be whole. The storm that brought them together did not destroy. It revealed. It revealed that hope is never truly gone, that kindness can still rewrite endings, and that love, once given, can heal even the deepest wounds. Maybe tonight you are
That looks
carrying
good.
your
Oh,
own
no.
storm. Maybe you have felt abandoned, unseen, or weighed
Like
down by
that.
silence. Let this story remind you, someone can still step in. A stranger, a friend, a moment of grace. You never know when love will arrive. And sometimes, when you least expect it, you will not just be rescued. You will rescue someone else too. Here at Hidden Echo Stories, we believe in these moments. Stories that remind us that kindness exists, that second chances are possible, and that the echoes of compassion ripple further than we can ever see. If this story touched you, even in the smallest way, we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories and keep walking with us through tales of resilience, hope, and the quiet power of love. Because the next story might be the one your heart has been waiting for.